Hello, this is Will Faerber, and today we're looking at a first submission by Elisabeth of her horse Evento. Evento is a PRE Andalusian, which means he's a Spanish sport horse. I want to say I don't have the still photograph on here, but he already looks better than he did in the still photograph that you sent. He was very, very collapsed through the back, as you could see, and you were absolutely right to just stop riding him because his back was so low, so to speak, so collapsed that really you could have done no good for this horse on his back. But this is already looking better. Even just the couple of weeks you've been doing this, or 10 times you said, his back already looks better than it did in that photograph. So you could just see how much he must have been collapsing under the weight of the rider in that. So this is exactly the right thing to be doing. Just going back to the very beginning, getting him strengthened over his back so he can lift. And this is a good lesson for everybody, you know. It takes about 2 years to put the foundation work on a horse, but if you start with a horse that's already collapsed in the back and has been going that way for a number of years, you know, it may take you a good year just to get the back up to where it can begin to carry weight. But just know that that time will pass, and if you do this, you know, you will correct the horse and you'll get years and years and years of good use out of the work, out of the horse, you know. Very often I seem to say these things about how long it takes to train horses, and people seem astonished by that. If you have ever read any good book on the subject of training horses, it will tell you the same thing, no matter what type they are. Interestingly enough, very few people have written books telling people that they could do this in 3 or 4 weeks, yet people seem to think that, you know, that's what can be done. You know, horses need a couple of 90 days of breaking in and they're ready to ride. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. That sort of old 90-day wonder thing that we used to call it, you know, is nothing but that. It's a wonder that the horse doesn't go lame sooner than it does. So anyway, you're on the right track. Just going back to the beginning with this horse, he looks like he's going to be a really nice one. And I love these PRE horses. We work with a lot of them down in Mexico. And boy, I wish more ladies would buy them, you know, and smaller people, because they just have wonderful attitudes. They have wonderful gaits, and the way they have corrected their gaits now with these PRE horses is a wonderful thing. You know, they're moving just as well as any other sport horses these days. So good job, and keep up the good work with this one, and you're going to get there. And just like you're doing there, that's a great walk. You know, you can't do too much of that. That's lovely like that. And the beauty of the walk is we can keep it going for a long time. And you can either go in a circle or go around the ring, as you can, or vary between the two. That's perfectly fine. I like the fact that you're using a lunging cavesson on him. That's very good. So the horse that's been hollow for so long is probably hard in the mouth. So we probably need to go back to the beginning and re-educate him all over again. You know, horses that are hollow and get ridden either end up, you know, hard as rocks in the mouth, or they end up broken in the neck, one or the other, where they're sort of permanently behind the bridle. But fortunately for you, this one doesn't look like that's happened to him. His neck actually looks quite good. So I love how he's stretching out there. That's a really wonderful walk, a good tempo in it, and a good position for his head and neck that allows him to come through in the walk. So very good. You know, that first couple of years of a horse's work, it's very interesting, because I say this to most people when they come into training, and it doesn't matter. It seems to take about the same amount of time, you know, whether they've been messed with a lot, you know, with the exception of those that, you know, have really been collapsed in the back, and we have to do so much work to help them before we can get on them. But generally speaking, it's about 2 years with most horses, you know, before you see that foundation really solidify and we're able to bring them up into collection. Or I should say more correctly, they come up into collection almost all by themselves when we do all the rest of this work correctly. So we can see with this horse how even trotting there, how far his legs go back behind the body, you know, when he brings his head up like that. You can see he's still pulling with his shoulders here and bracing upwards. The only thing I was going to say is, you know, and then you're getting him into a really good place. I think your sham bone could be just a little bit tighter. Just take it up, you know, 3 or 4 holes and just take a little bit of the slack out of it, because there's times when he comes up a little higher than you'd like him to. You'd like that trot to be a little more active, so once he gets there, then try to send him on and get a little bit more swinging trot. But as I said, I think it would help you to tighten that sham bone just a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit, just so he encounters it a little bit sooner. And then just send him on a little more actively. But what you're doing here is a very, very, very good start. You're well on your way to correcting the problems with this horse. And once again, you know, people have this illusion that, you know, these type of horses that they don't need to be stretched. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, you know. Now, if you started one, you know, right away in the beginning and you got it started right and you got its back developing correctly and saying that it had developed correctly as a young horse, because this is what we often see, you know, is that today too many horses are being raised in very small pens. They don't get the kind of constant movement that they should as babies, where they're constantly got their heads and necks stretched down, grazing over grass. And unfortunately, a lot of these young horses just don't have much development when we start them, you know. So we have to do a lot more stretching work with them. Just like a couch potato child, you know. If we have a kid and it sits home on the couch all day long, and you know, by the time it's 18, its body's already falling apart. We see so much of that going on today, you know, with the junk food that people have been fed, and you know, and they get to be 18, 19 years old, and you'd think that they were 30 or 40, you know, the way their bodies are. So same thing with horses, you know, they cannot be raised in little couch potato pens, so out on big grass where they can move continuously. And then, of course, once we come into training, we replace that, you know, and of course, we always want to, just to add a few little things that we're talking about here, because people ask me these questions about feeding. Always feed your horses off the ground, folks, on tubs off of the ground. They should not be eating out of mangers or anything high up in the air. They're designed to eat off the ground. That's how nature designed them. Their digestive system works well that way. So all of those things help. Now, once again, he could just be a little more active. I feel like you could send him on just a little bit more and see how he looks to the outside there. So every time he looks to the outside, you see how you want to get the horse on both ends of the horse on the same circle. Right now he tends to go pulling his shoulders a little to the outside. So try to get him to move away from you, get his hindquarters to yield the hindquarters to you, which is the most natural and basic part of training. When you think about it, if you've ever seen horses out in herds together, you know, that's the basic thing they do with one another. You know, the dominant horse makes the other ones yield to his presence, so to speak, and especially yield the hindquarters, because when a horse is pointing its hindquarters at you, it's basically saying, you know, it's challenging you, because if you get close enough, they will kick you. So once again, also why it's so important that we lunge horses, you know, on a rope and with a lunge whip that's long enough that we don't have to get anywhere near the back end of the horse when we're lunging. Not to mention the fact that a horse needs to be on at least a 20-meter circle. I see people trying to lunge horses, you know, with lead ropes practically, and around in a practically 6-meter circle, and of course the horse is never getting any kind of rhythm, and the people often get kicked. So you're going about this just right. Once again, just a little more active is all I'd like to see. I've seen the same thing here. I think you could just tighten that shambone a little bit, you know, maybe 3 or 4 holes, just take the slack up out of it. That's where we want him, is like that. And when he gets in this position here, just try to get a little more swinging and active. But already compared to the still picture that I saw of this horse, his back was so collapsed. So this is already a huge improvement in just a couple of weeks of this. It's lovely like that. Now, once he gets in that stretch, once again, I'd like to see him just a little bit more active. So over time, try to get it a little more active. It's also, I saw he tried to spin on you there. It's also why I insist when I lunge that people stop the horse and go up and change the direction. Because if you start doing that automatic switch around thing, that's good if you really know what you're doing. But if you don't, pretty soon the horse, that's all they do is flip around. The people can't keep them going in one direction. So go in one direction, stop the horse, go up to the horse, and change the direction. And just try to keep a little more of the slack out of the line. You're doing a good job with this, though. So again, I just want to see everything become a little more active, but I'm sure that it will. I mean, this is really going well. You're having moments that he's excellent, and you're really getting into the stretch. Good walk there. So again, you can see that dip every time he comes around. You can see how much you have to fill in, and also how just downhill the horse is, you know, because he's never had this kind of work. So what happens is the shoulders have never pulled up. That is, the withers have never pulled up through the shoulders. So after a little bit of time of this, and you look at this horse 6 months from now, and he'll look much more uphill. His withers will be higher, and his neck will come out of the body a little bit of a different angle. And that's what allows horses, that physical change actually is what allows horses to ultimately collect. If they're never developed correctly like this, they never develop that uphill appearance, that the withers never pull up through the shoulders. So that basically the horse stays downhill. And with bad dressage, where we see people pulling the necks of the horses back and, you know, whipping them into some kind of exaggerated gait that means nothing. That's why so many horses are going lame today. You see so many people spend more time with veterinarians than they spend riding their horses. The trainers have them riding them upside down and hollow, so they're constantly wearing out their joints. Remember, it's getting horses over the back that puts the shock absorber system on the horse that allows the horse to move and have much less impact on its body. And also the fact that the horse starts pulling up to the belly is so important to the horse's digestion. You know, we've had very few horses in my life ever colic. I've only had one colic in 50 years of being a professional horseman, and that was a horse that was colicking getting off a truck, because I've always worked my horses this way, and I think it has a great deal to do with it, you know. Like when you saw even this horse, you can see how his belly kind of hangs down a bit, though he's starting to pull up through there a little bit now, which is looking much better, as opposed to the still photograph that you sent me, where he looked like a pregnant mare, a swayback pregnant mare kind of, and once again, those muscles through the abdominal muscles really aid in digestion. It's so important that we have them. But this is really looking good now. And compare this trot than what you had at the beginning. He's tracking much further under his body. He's pushing up, and the hind leg is already coming forward sooner. That's the key to look at, is when is the hind leg coming forward? When you see the hind leg go way back behind the body before it comes off the ground, that tells you the horse is quite hollow. So once again, once you get him to here, I'd like to see you send him on just a little bit. Once again, ask him to yield those hindquarters. There, go like that. That's much better. And just a little bit more active. I think you can get a little more swing out of this horse now that you have him working correctly. But look how already you can begin, once he gets in that position. You can envision the ball rolling over the ground, so to speak. Stand back and look at the whole horse. Don't just look at the head and neck. Everyone today is all concerned about what the head and neck is doing, and that has the least thing to do with anything. The head and neck will be in the correct position for the horse's body type when you do everything else correctly. That is when the back end is going correctly. So not every horse can have the same high head and neck set. This horse, as an example, for this type of a horse, does not have that. A lot of these horses, the neck comes very much straight out of the shoulders upwards. This is not a horse like that at all. His neck comes straight out of the body. So you can't expect him to have the same head and neck position, ultimately, that a horse that's with a different kind of head and neck natural position is, or that is its conformation. And once again, that's why we look for good conformation in horses to start with. There's no doubt about it. The better the conformation, the easier it makes it to do all this. But we can compensate for a lot of physical disabilities and sort of a lesser conformation, so to speak, by training them correctly. They can all end up at a very, very good place as long as they're sound. So once again, a little more active here. And as I was saying, I think if you just shorten that sham bone a little bit, you could just keep him there a little more consistently. But you're certainly getting a good stretch. But I think it could just be a little more consistent and a little more active. Once again, watch the small circles. This is getting a little bit too small. Move him out there a little bit. You see how he started to lose rhythm. So, at a horse at this level, about a 20-meter circle is about what you should be doing all the time. Any smaller than that, and he's probably not going to be able to do it. But now you can walk with him, however. If you need to encourage him forward, I would turn my whip more towards the horse than you're doing there and keep it towards him, since he's constantly trying to pull his hindquarters in towards you, though this is getting better as it's going. But he just still needs a little bit more active. He's just not quite all the way there yet. He has moments like right there, like that. And once again, look how that affects the hock movement. When you see how the back end is moving, every time he stretches all the way down, look how much deeper the hind leg comes under the body, and you see the hock move in a more round, active circle. When he hollows like that, you come around there and you see when he comes up, all of a sudden the hind legs seem to get left behind for a moment. And that's exactly what's happening, because he disconnects, and all of a sudden the hind legs aren't moving with the front legs any longer. Very nice. I look forward to seeing this horse in a few months, because he's already changed so much just from the 2 weeks of you doing this. About the time, when you see the belly, like standing here, you can see how he's still a little distended, through the belly. When you see that, when you're ending your lunge sessions and you see that pulled all the way up, and you see that line begin to form along the edge of the rib cage there, that tells us he's really engaging his abdominal muscles. That is engaging his core. Remember that correct riding is just like correct Pilates exercise for a human being. It's core strengthening. So it's not just that they lift the back, they have to consequently also lift the abdominal muscles as well. It all works together, just like you and I. You try to hold your back together and let your stomach hang out. And this is an error that I see very many teachers telling people, that they should just let their guts hang out when they sit to the trot. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, and nothing could be further than what will be healthful for you. I've seen way too many people who've been taught how to sit to the trot badly, and they get to be 50 years old. I've seen even some younger than that, and they're having to have hip replacements. bad dressage will destroy your body just as well as it will the horses. So just remember that. So that's also why it's so important that we do this correctly, and especially if you sit to the trot on hollow-backed horses, where you're nothing moves right. The horse doesn't suspend you, and you can't really connect through the back of the horse so that your body and the horses meld and become one, unless you're in just exaggeratedly slow gaits or these kind of hollow gaits where the horse is lifting their legs high off the ground like a saddlebred. And sadly, we've seen too much of that in the dressage ring. Good walk here. Now, I like the fact that you're coming back to the walk quite often, but I'd like to see you just get him a little more swinging and active and steady in that trot for a little while longer before you come back to the walk. Once again, I tend to just, unless I'm working with a very young horse, I just go through the gears, and when I go through the gears, if I go all the way to canter, I come back to walk for a little bit, and then I'm done. With young horses, they are all a little bit different, but we want to get them into the zone, so to speak. And if we keep coming back and forth, they tend to not get there. So if we keep them in a trot till you just see that floppy earness and the eyes relax, and it's just like a runner. It starts to feel good to them if they're not in any pain anywhere, and you're not driving them out of their minds. Horses love to move, and they're animals that were by nature able to move across vast territories. And they get into that zone where they just get the movement going. It feels good to them. Imagine, they stand around most of their day, so they really start to look forward to this. And once again, let me point out that we always work our horses. If you're going to turn horses out, they should be worked before you turn them out. If you turn your horse out and run it like a lunatic before you train it, it's probably injured itself. I mean, if you talk to most veterinarians, they'll tell you that a huge percentage of the injuries they see are from people turning fresh horses out and letting them go crazy in rings. I actually have even seen a horse that actually impaled itself with a rail and killed itself, running around like a lunatic. So, we want to work them first and then turn them out after we work them. So they're nice and calm, and the turnout is a reward for them as opposed to wearing them out. If we wear a horse out running it around like a lunatic in a ring, it's not going to want to work with us because it's already tired. We don't want to work with a tired horse. We want to work with a fresh horse and teach that horse discipline so that in the best way, that is, by not inflicting pain or injury to the horse, and doing it in such a way that we always stop before the horse is exhausted if we possibly can. Now, see, same thing here. You need to push those hindquarters away from him a little more like that. But good. Look how much better this trot's starting to look. It's starting to have this round kind of bouncy feel to it. He's actually starting to get his springs on, as I like to say. So once again, you see every time he hollows like that, watch how the back legs fall out behind as soon as he gets down the stretch. So every time he does that, you want to get him to yield those hindquarters a little more. So even on the circle here, he's always kind of going a little haunches in at you, which basically tells you that he's also basically, confronting you. He's not really yielding to you when they do that. So once again, getting the hindquarters to move away from you is the most basic and elemental form of control, and it's just what horses do to one another. So it's where we want this to take place. That's like I said about with young horses. We never want to make them stand still or try to force them to stand still. We want to just keep them going until they want to stand still. That's the way you go about it. So this is looking really good, and for the 2 weeks you've been working on this compared to what I saw. You see right here, he just wouldn't get away from you so much if you just had that shambone just a little bit tighter. Once again, we never want to tie the horse's head down with it, but it should be a little tighter than that. He should encounter a little more tension when he goes all the way up like that. There, now that's looking really good. Look how good that looks. Now you see how the hind legs are staying under the body there? As long as his head and neck is down, they stay under the body, and you can stand back and you can see that round ball rolling over the ground. And once again, every time he inverts and you see him like pull to the outside, you see how that stops happening and the hindquarters fall out behind. But this really looks like it's going to be a wonderful horse for you. I love these PRE horses. They just have such wonderful temperaments and such excellent gaits. I wish more people would get them these days. I see way too many people buying horses that are, as I say, way too big a wave for them. They just don't realize that, yes, you may be able to ride the horse, but you have to be able to ride a horse when something goes wrong. And so many of these 18-hand warm bloods are so powerful you know, that even though the people can ride them, all of a sudden the first time they give out a little buck, they go flying and get injured because they don't realize, no one ever told them that that's the most important thing. It's not whether you can ride the horse when it's going well. Can you ride it when it's going badly, when something goes wrong? Because every horse is going to give a little kick out every now and then or buck up. Something's going to spook it. It's going to happen. If you think it's not going to, then you shouldn't be riding horses because you must be prepared for that to happen. This is really good here. Look how well he stays under the body. See that when he starts to get that bounce in the trot? That's what you're looking for, and that tells you he's really engaging through his top line. So you've really done a wonderful job with this for 2 weeks. This is excellent. Just by these few improvements I think that I have handed you here, you should be able to get him even a little further. I really look forward to your next video, and keep up the good work. He's going to turn into a wonderful animal for you. Congratulations.